recording. Okay, so hello everybody, and welcome to another transparent conversation here at the Through the Magical Door series that I have created. I'm Samaya, I'm a psychic soul activator and shaman for creators and visionaries, and I'm extremely happy to be welcoming my guest today in what is, I think, number 4, the conversation number 4 now. So I really love the numerology of 4 as well, which is to do with stability and groundedness. So I would love to welcome Delphine O'Keefe, today's guest. Hello, Delphine. So lovely to have you here.
Thanks so much, Samaya. I'm so honored to be asked to be interviewed by you for this amazing series.
So thank you so much for being here. And let me tell you a few things about Delphine, because I've known Delphine over the last couple of years. I've had a real pleasure to get to know her a little bit more closely through working with Delphine at the playground that I've been teaching, the business and shamanism course that I've been running. And over the period of time that I've known Delphine, and we've grown to be friends, I've really had the pleasure to benefit from the incredible depth and wisdom she holds. And yet she's a very young woman who has, obviously everything that a young woman really has, but she holds wisdom that is so much beyond her years. And I've got a real pleasure to be having this conversation today. I'm really, really excited about it. And let me tell you also that Delphine is actually a guiding soul for women to deeply know, love, trust, and express the true selves, so they can really embody themselves and live the lives that they're meant to live. So we've got quite a lot of stuff to talk about. Delphine is a psychotherapist. She has an active practice, and she's also an intuitive guide and is a somatic coach. So she really blends some really interesting experience, a lot of experience there. And because of the depth of her psychotherapy work as well, I feel like there's some really juicy topics that we can talk about here. So welcome, Delphine. Lovely, lovely to have you here. So first of all, let's just get started with the whole aspect of embodiment and somatic. So tell me a little bit more about, in your own journey, in your own life, what was it that attracted you to embodiment? What was it, and what sort of time in your life that became like a significant thing as part of your development, that you're now in that stage where your embodiment becomes really important in how you guide others? I'd love to know a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So I think that journey probably started for me more consciously almost 10 years ago when I started my psychotherapy training. And it's funny to hear you say, like, to call me a young woman, because it feels like, over 4 decades of this like massive journey coming from such a different place to who I am now. So for me, the embodiment journey came from the opposite, which was feeling very disembodied and disconnected from my body. And it was a really kind of gradual winding back and coming home to actually living and feeling and sensing that I was in a body in this female lifetime. So yeah, I was just like, the image I have is always just like a kind of a stick with a big head on it. Just like,
Yeah.
I was kind of re-identified with here upwards, and the rational, the intellectual, the cognitive, like firing, ideas and just absorbing everything in a very heady way, but not really digesting and kind of integrating my life like embodying it, like enacting, like taking action, living, being, breathing from a place of having an actual body. And that might sound really strange, but I think probably people can identify with that in the sense that when you're grounded or ungrounded, not everybody does, because I do a lot of that work with clients, but it's like a feeling of being a bit kind of floating and not quite anchored in the real world.
Do you think that's kind of highly linked also with being young, and that the maturation process takes a bit of, like, it's that, James Hillman is one of my favorite psychologists, and I love how he has this note. He talks about this notion. He's very kind of soul focused. He's really into like talking about the soul. And one of the things I really, really, really love, this phrase that he uses, is about growing down.
Oh,
to our
nice.
being. So there's
Yeah.
that growing down, and in a way, do you think from your experience that maybe partly it is like as we're young, like, I mean, I resonate with that. I've been very much up there,
Yeah,
and
partly.
you
I think
know,
it's a lot to do with that. Like it takes time to kind of become ourselves and really land like in our bodies and kind of feel like the way that you're moving or speaking or responding or being is based on who you really are and what you really believe and need and you know inside of you and not all of the stuff you've inherited from everybody else. But I also think it's mostly
yeah,
in my case it was mostly to do with a kind of a self-protection mechanism and
right. Oh wow.
trauma, you know, like it's kind of the early life experiences of absorbing so much in the world around me because I was such a kind of sensitive, porous little being, like most of us, like all of us are
Of
really,
course.
and it just became a safer place to be in my head.
Wow. This
And
is very juicy, actually.
this,
Um,
this, I kind of assume that this is, you know, the case for a lot of people. Maybe it isn't, but like I think some people are born with different energies. So even if you look at kind of archetypes in astrology, we can be more like I'm quite a watery person, so I did have like a strong connection with my emotions. It just had been covered over, and other people are kind of quite. So I'm very watery and airy, very in the kind of the thoughts and the ideas and the ethers.
yeah, yeah.
And I maybe had less of that kind of earth energy, which some people do have. I think some people are born in, you know, and especially if they're not, their natural development is not so heavily kind of interrupted, they are just kind of like they're people of the earth, you know what I mean? Some people are just really belong in a forest or they belong doing things with their hands and they're really naturally drawn to that. They're very soily, earthy people. So I think there's differences there, as well as some of us, like a lot of us, get cut off from our natural essence through those early life experiences.
I love this, and I feel I'd love to unpack that a little bit more, because I think that a lot of people will benefit from understanding this. And you mentioned some key things here, and about the sort of life trauma, yeah,
Yeah.
and how that can be a disruptive part of the process of embodiment in a way, and what that can happen. And I'd love to know a little bit more about, especially with your background as a therapist and the experiences you have through your client work and stuff, obviously without becoming personal, but on examples. But this thing about, in a way, because trauma can mean so many different things for different people,
Really
and I'd love to get a little bit more of your insight on this, especially because, say, for instance, I think that sometimes a lot of people don't realize that trauma doesn't have to be just this one big bang,
yes.
right?
Thank you for
Which,
picking this up.
and a lot of the times what we block from realizing how much there's all these other mini traumas that have such a powerful impact almost on a daily basis. And as a defense mechanism, we kind of end up like warding ourselves off as a way of so I'd love to know a little bit more about that, what your insight is, and tell us a little bit about those different types of trauma that people can experience that are not necessarily just the big bang.
Yeah. Oh, this is such an important topic. And, you know, I think people can alienate themselves from the word trauma and think it doesn't apply to them
Yeah.
because it's assumed that it's a one-off event or it's the very obvious ones, such as like the ones that are talked about or reported, you know, even in the media. So say it's like a sexual assault or ongoing sexual trauma, or, you know, being held at gunpoint, or just these kind of isolated incidents or recurring incidents that are very starkly and obviously trauma and
And that
abusive.
can feel unrelatable for many, right?
Exactly. But actually, we are all traumatized to some degree. I fully believe this. And it's kind of a weird thing. It's a sort of a mystery of life that we are born into this earth. Being in utero, we absorb absolutely everything that our mother's experiencing and whatever environment she's in, and however many supports she has or not. And then being born is like an initial trauma. Now we can kind of recover from this. And that's the amazing thing about us as humans, is we can recover from trauma. We really, really can, no matter what kind of trauma it is. But those kind of, you know, interruptions in flow from being born to arriving into a world, having air in your lungs, and then just being so utterly vulnerable. Like I cannot highlight enough how completely absorbent and vulnerable we are in the first like years of our lives, you know, compared to other species. We're highly dependent beings. I don't know how we survived this far and how we've evolved so much, because, you know, we depend so much on our early caregivers, and that's where the trauma happens. Because what's known as developmental trauma is the kind of recurring, as you say, kind of micro traumas of being not
Yes.
being attuned to in the right way. And
Yes, that's a
not
really lovely word actually that you've used. Very
attunement, yeah.
helpful. Yeah,
It's,
yeah.
if you're interested in this kind of stuff, Winnicott is an amazing theorist and just a very lovely, gives off such a lovely energy in his writings, who understands this so well about kind of the environment that a child needs. And so what happens with this topic is often people go into a sort of reactive, like blaming thing or shaming thing, where it's like, well, I didn't mean to do it, or it wasn't that bad, or, parents, people who are in a healing journey and are parents themselves, is really challenging and kind of creates a conflict, because you're also recognizing how you might have been traumatizing your children without intending to.
Hmm.
So this is why it's sort of a strange aspect of the human condition, that we come into this life, we absorb, like, in my therapy training, I can't tell you how many times I was just going like, oh, whoa, mind blown. That's why I do that thing that I thought was just
Wow.
something else, or I thought it was natural. I thought everyone saw the world in this way. I really believe this about myself. And then it's just this unpeeling of layer after layer after layer of a new reality, and like removing a million pairs of shades, to stop
Yeah.
seeing the world in this. And it's kind of, I mean, it's difficult to sort of synthesize and give specific examples that do justice to the wide breadth of traumas that can happen. But it really is anything from being kind of paid attention to too much or too little, fed too much, too little, touched and held a little bit too much or a little bit like not enough. It's really sad and kind of poignant, but anything that interrupts the mother's intuitive response to the baby that grows and grows as she comes into that role and gets that experience, can be experienced as the baby by the baby as a trauma. So
So in
it's
a way, it sounds like there's that sense of, like, in a way, we come with a default sort of mechanism to some extent through the conditioning and the genetics of family and behavioral patterns of family and all that. And then anything that is kind of not operating within that, where we can maximize our default and feel protected within that default, can kind of cause sort of mini traumas in a way.
yeah, and it shapes who we are. So that's basically, like
Yeah.
personality typing systems, um, anything to do with kind of
Attachments
our
and
whole personality is basically shaped through micro traumas, but also through kind of the positive things that we interact with in our environment. So we're hardwired to soak up goodness as well. We're hardwired
so
to bond, um,
absolutely.
through. So we're so hardwired to connect with others and to meet other people to keep us safe, that we will literally do anything to adapt to the environment that we're growing up in. It's like a tree, you see the whole history of what nutrients came in, what interruptions happened with weather changes. You'll see that in the shape of the tree trunk and the branches, like
I
this
love that metaphor so much.
individual, and you're looking at it going, whoa, this tree has lived through so much. So we literally are like little seeds. Like the acorn is such a perfect metaphor for this, because we're these, you look at these giant trees and you're like, that tree was this big at one time. And we're the same, like we were just this little package of potentiality and and DNA, and now we're understanding more and more and more that it's also like to do with epigenetics and everything we inherit from our family, kind of not just kind of biologically and at the cellular level, ways of processing stress hormones or not, through whatever our ancestors lived through. Like that's all in the mix, but
Sure.
also their behaviors, the taboos that are in families, what is valued and what's not valued. We are so heavily conditioned when we come into this lifetime that it's almost like a miracle that any of us get to become, to unpeel that and then become who we really are in our kind of in the midlife. So like you said, the early life is a lot of trying out, okay, so people say this is good, so I'm going to try this out and, create an ego to help me survive in the world. And then I feel like you spend the rest of your life undoing that. You need a healthy ego to survive and
Of
to
course.
adapt,
Yeah.
and then you spend the rest of your life kind of seeing what you can surrender and seeing what's more has your way of doing it. And it's really courageous work, because it involves being at odds with other people a lot of the time, or it involves doing things that are not valued by others, doing things.
And you're talking about the process of undoing and unconditioning, yeah, like remove, like kind of moving through the conditioning and undoing the conditioning, right?
And also how you live. So like choosing to live your life in a way that suits you better,
Yeah.
and which is better for everyone, because when you're more aligned with yourself inside of you, and this is harmony of like I know who I am. Like we never know fully who we are, you know, but when it feels more aligned and you're living in a way that your core needs are met and you get to express yourself more,
Mm.
then you're such a better person. Like it's not a selfish thing to do at all. A lot of people are like, oh, this
Sure.
care and self-work, it's all very self-indulgent, you know, the inner critic comes in. But it is the healthiest thing you can do for others, because then you're not projecting all your unhealed crap onto everybody else and having these miserable relationship patterns where you're always feeling the same disappointments or feeling like not seen and all of that stuff. So it's such important work, but it's kind of hard because going on the journey itself is hard, but then also living out who you really are can feel kind of lonely at first until you meet people who are more aligned
Yeah.
with that. And then that's when it
Yeah.
gets juicy and you feel like you meet your people who are not necessarily your family of origin, even if you still have loving relationships with them.
Sure.
It's
Sure.
like it's a process of separating out from family, you know, like I don't know if you know Jodorowsky, you know, the guy who does kind of psycho magic and works with the tarot a lot. And he
I think you've talked about him a couple of years ago.
a while, but he's coming up just now for some reason. And his whole thing is psychogenealogy, you know, and family therapy, family systems therapy, and all that stuff. It's all about like the amount of stuff we inherit. So I just think it's so important for people to know that when you're on a journey of self-exploration, spiritual evolution, whatever it is, psychotherapy, like there's so many things that it's not just about, there's so much undoing that has to happen as well as redoing. So the shadow and the light are always together. It's not just about willing yourself into being a better person and being somehow different. That's just really
You,
stressful and not fair, because you have to recognize how much you've inherited, you know.
you've mentioned the term unbecoming. I've seen it on your website as well, and I really, really love that. But I also love how you're, in a way, through what you're describing, and we went into it through discussing about trauma, how in a way that process of undoing and unbecoming is a necessary process of, is in a way the kind of path to healing that trauma. So that we don't operate from that default, and we understand all those elements, and we do that through the healing process, right? From the sounds of what you're describing.
And like it is a default because it's unconscious. You don't even know that it's a thing that you do because you assume everybody else thinks and feels the same. So that's what's so hard. People talk about shadow work and, oh, you know, that's my shadow. It's like, if it's your real shadow, you don't know it's there. You know, like the unconscious is unconscious. We can bring it into consciousness and start realizing, oh my God, that's an assumption that I've made my whole life, through, you know, solo work and inner work, but and self-awareness. But often it really needs like another person opposite us to tell us, to show us our shadows.
It's interesting because one of the things I've noticed in my own personal journey is how the deeper I've been going into my own shadow work is that I find that I have felt like the more I get to love the parts of mine that are kind of the darker aspects of mine, in a way that they're not as scary.
Yeah.
And but also it's like, I've noticed, for instance, at times where there's some aspects of my behavior that might not be as appealing to, say, some people around me, yeah? But I realize, you know what? They are really not as much of an issue for me. And
Yes, that's lovely.
and I feel like, so, I mean, obviously, you know, I don't plan to harm anybody, and it's certainly like, you know, I don't like, or be rude or whatever, or kind of, you know, but I feel like, so if I'm not going down that road and I'm okay with this, then maybe we need to look at if this is something that works or not, right? So, and for me, that's been part of the process of just getting comfortable in my process of undoing. So, for instance, some of the triggers that I become for family members felt like, oh my goodness. And I'm not just talking about family, you know, because they come from a very particular background, you know, but, and obviously in a way it's quite easy to talk about that in relation to family. But for people who are doing work with themselves, and I feel like, you know what, I'm good with the level of honesty I bring into this. You know, again, I want to monitor to the fact, like, I don't want to be rude, and I certainly don't want to be like, you know, kind of traumatizing somebody. But you know, I've become much more confident around my both light and my dark, that in a way now I'm a little bit more discerning around you know, if some things don't work for some people, that's okay, but I'm not going to change them unless they do feel that they're impacting my life in a very, very big way. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, so you have that discernment now. You know whether it's something that you do need to take on board, but you're not, and you maybe look at, but you're not blindly people pleasing as we do when we're children.
No,
Assumed it's
no.
a problem, which is what we feel when we're raised, you know. But that's such a lovely way to be, and that's something that I really felt about you. You know, when I started working with you, was you have, you know, I kind of thought she's obviously done a lot of psychotherapy or is a therapist or something, because I don't know, just, and not, it's not only psychotherapists who have that, but there's a depth to the amount of inner work that you've done that suggests that, that conveys that a lot of healing has happened around it, to the point where you're not still acting as though the shadow is a problem to be fixed, you know.
No, no, it doesn't feel like that.
No, you really kind of embrace it and you go, oh yeah, but that's okay too, because oh, here's the gift that I get from that thing that was painful. And it's kind of like everything can be repurposed, you know. Everything that it has been painful can be processed in our bodies when we're supported to come home to them and actually tolerate sensory, you know, kind of,
Yeah,
at the physical level, feel our emotions. Because again, like when people talk about shadow work and working with the unconscious, a lot of it is like snotty crying and grieving, grief work. So for me,
yeah,
this whole thing, that's the middle bit that often gets missed out. It's like, here's the past and here's the shadow, and I'm really good at connecting the past to the present and the future and kind of seeing how that can transmute, you know, and drawing those links. But then the bit in the middle is, it looks like the really, I often say, like it's this unglamorous, like excruciating, or just
yeah.
kind of a bit like work of basically being your own, becoming your own best friend, and actually being present with yourself, reparenting yourself through the kind of the daily mundane choices about what you're going to eat, how you're going to take care of others, and just really kind of supporting yourself through bereavement, because you're basically
Yeah.
grieving
So love that you're saying that.
parts of yourself. So it's like, it's really weird, you know, when you call in new things and you're wanting to become somebody different, it's like it's a no-brainer that you'd want to be this new version of yourself, or have this quality expressed more. But the bit that we also need to do is kind of backtrack and allow the process of letting go of who we were, who we thought we had to be. All
This
that
is really big.
you know, I don't know why I keep doing that. And it's like, you just need to sort of let it cry out, process, move it out, you know, to kind of say goodbye to that part of yourself that served you so well, because it kept you safe, it kept you connected to others, connected to the people who were taking care of you. And if you didn't have that defense mechanism, you wouldn't be alive today. So I really, really honor those defense mechanisms, even if they're such a pain in the ass and they make us, you know, have painful lives later. They were originally developed to keep us functioning in a very kind of aggressive environment, you know, for children.
And can I also say that, because I remember in my experience quite a lot of the time, I didn't know at the time that I was doing shadow work when I was. Sometimes shadow work will also be like part of a part of that journey is being in the dark night of the soul, where you literally don't feel that you're doing anything that you're benefiting yourself to get out of it, but you're in the midst of it all, in the eye of the storm. And I didn't even feel that I was helping myself. But I remember my 20s was a very deep time, and like there was a lot of heaviness, there was a lot of stuff that was being worked through, but I didn't realize until now, looking back. I mean, there was like dedicated therapy practice space for me. I mean, I trained as a therapist, but I remember I did like years of going to a therapist on a weekly basis, and that was a really wonderful holding space. But I do remember that a big chunk of the time I didn't even realize I was doing the work. And maybe just to, I'd love to hear from you about this, and in a way to give that encouragement to people, as well as to, you know, when they're going through the rough times, that in a way maybe that is part of that shadow journey, and they don't need to have everything figured out. They don't.
And is like, and like, even I still, like, I live and breathe this work, and even I still think there's something wrong when I feel shit, or there's something I haven't done, or have I not been good enough this or that. So it sneaks in everywhere, like the shadow, the inner critic. There's these core structures that come up in my work all the time. And so the inner critic is one of them, and it will sneak in and make you be like bad at what you're doing, no matter what it is, even in your spiritual practice, especially in anything that is really important to you. So like it's not wrong. Like culturally, we have made it wrong to not be okay, this kind of toxic positivity. And I like, I feel, you know, because we internalize it, like we internalize misogyny and homophobia and all of that. for being honest, we all have a degree of that in us. So it's like I'm still in small ways kind of making myself wrong for not having, like, not doing things in a way that's totally joyful or embodying what I preach, or you know what I mean? So
Yeah,
it's kind of like it
absolutely.
never stops. We're always trying to, I suppose, I see it more now, less as kind of like the heavy work of like chipping away the structures that are false identities and the kind of dislodging of the sludge. It was like that for a lot of years. Now it's a lot more about kind of loving myself when I'm least feeling
Yeah.
lovable,
Mm.
and really kind of sweet and kind to myself to any degree, even softening just a little bit when I'm having just like an awful day or a lot of self-doubt, or I've done something crap and I'm a bit ashamed, or like it's kind of those moments when you're having a dark night of the soul and you're having a meltdown, that if you can kind of just do something kind, that's so much more potent
I
and so
agree.
much more healing than
Yeah.
doing a million worksheets on your
Yeah.
shadow, or doing journaling, because I did it all mentally first. I processed it all cognitively and I was like, oh
We
great,
can consume as opposed to process and,
obsessed with it. Yeah,
work through. We can
exactly.
consume it as a thing we
You need
tick
to
off a
digest.
list.
It's like it hasn't landed until you're like it's trickled down, you grieve the old stuff and you start naturally becoming a little bit more kind of yourself.
I think
So,
this is where I feel shadow work can be such a good complementary on, or particularly not just shadow work, but particularly the dark night of the soul journey is kind of like, it's that kind of like, it's almost that Persephone journey, isn't it? Like she had to go down for 6 months, and I think that in a way, like all the because happiness is not about positive, happiness is not to do with positivity,
like
to
truthfully,
experience. If anything, it's a much more bittersweet, much more dynamic, much more dark and light experience than it is, and it's not comfort. It's not meant to be comfort or positive, or that's not what happiness is about. It's much more gritty than that. And I feel something that I'm really grateful for the dark nights of the soul. At the time I didn't know that, is that in a way they can create that anchor where we go within the soul for the soul to grieve,
yes,
and for us to get into that abstract space where that inner work can take place, and where that shedding, and then absolutely when we come out of it, so beneficial to do all the good stuff that we need to do, because the soul will know to bring us back down when it's time to go back down, and life will bring it to us, or events, or whatever.
it'll,
um
it'll happen at some stage. But when you have looked your pain in the eyes, and when you have been present with yourself through the darkest moments to whatever capacity you have, then it's not so scary. Like you said it a moment ago, it's like it's not that. I mean, I really don't want to disrespect people's pain, because pain is,
no.
we can die of it, like, but it's like when you've allowed it to flow in you, it doesn't take up so much of your energy. It's the same
Mhm.
with all shadow aspects, which also include, by the way, powerful things. So if you're also like a really powerful person, or you have all these capacities that are dormant in your unconscious because you've been told you weren't that kind of person or whatever. So the powerful and the ugly and the like, all of that stuff that's in our unconscious, when we start kind of accepting a little bit more, we find out that it's not that bad. It's just our
Yeah.
families unconsciously made us feel like it was really bad. But
Yeah.
also, just something you said there, yeah, like I remember, I hope you don't mind me sharing this, but one of the things that really attracted me to you, and I was like, I'm definitely working with this woman, was when you shared about we were kind of comparing about what it looks like behind the scenes to do this famous shadow work. And
Mm.
you were like, oh, so funny, one day when you had like a breakthrough and you were journaling or something, and then you're crying, and then you were like in mid like ugly cry when some guy passed by the window. I was just like, oh my god, that is so hilarious.
Really, I didn't
It's like,
remember it.
she's real. Yeah, she's real. She's doing this work. She's not just like, like this. So I was like, I want to keep being more that, it corresponded to my experience of it, which was like a much less pretty version of all of the the language about it, and the alchemy. Alchemy is such a beautiful word.
Mm.
But like that, the composting bit is pretty mulchy and pretty
Mm.
when you're kind of
Yeah, yucky.
transmuting and putting that to bed and going, oh, thanks, you served me well, but like, oh, well, okay, that's been a part of me too. Let me just digest that, and I can repurpose it into something that is like part of my life experience, part of who I've been in the world, and not have shame about it.
I
But
mean,
it,
Absolutely, but I can definitely though relate that with what you said earlier as well. That if I go through suffering or moments of crisis and healing, which I go through, um, I absolutely hate every second of it. I don't like it. I don't,
Yeah.
that bit has never evolved, has never changed.
Thank you.
That's not changed. And I don't think it will ever change. But I think that what has changed is maybe more of my default, like all the right things kick in to stay with the process. I think we're more attuned to now process better. But
Yeah.
we don't need to like it. We don't need to like it. It's not meant to be like. I mean, it's ridiculous to even like it. Why would you? Because sometimes I don't relate. I don't know about you. I don't relate. It's like I'm not the first to say I'm grateful I've had that experience. I mean, I do experience it at the very, 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 very end. But I feel sometimes it comes too prematurely. And I'm thinking like, I want to be furious first. I want to like be annoyed. And I'm so fucking glad I managed to, as a locked in child that I used to be, to manage to allow my anger to now come, because I it was too suppressed. So like, no, I'm not gonna bypass this shit, because this shit is the shit that comes first. So it's like, I'm not gonna be grateful until I'm grateful. And if I'm not grateful, I'm not gonna try to be grateful, because I'm not grateful.
Because that's just like perpetuating the same violence against yourself and making yourself like be kind of, as you said, like premature. It's forcing yourself to be false and fake.
It feels like the sometimes the new age culture, the spiritual kind of arena, can be a little bit like this automation of like, that toxic positivity you talked about. And I feel like what happens is, like, if people don't go through the process in a messy way that they need to experience to find their own way, don't give them a map that's going to bypass the shadow, because in a way the soul needs it, and that will set things in motion in a way that they have to be. But it's like, it's okay to not, like, I feel for me, like, I want to shout it from the rooftops, like, it's okay to not be grateful for the lesson that you received. It's okay to just get the lesson and get the fuck out, you know.
Also, exactly. And be like, oh, great, I feel good today.
I just want to go.
I think I'm never going to feel bad again. Oh, I've just had such a breakthrough. I am a queen. My life is so good. I think I'm done with shadow work for the rest of my life. And then it's like, you keep falling into that trap of thinking, it's like that Pema Chodron quote about things fall apart and then they come back together again, and then they fall apart again, and then our ego just wants to like latch on to the good stuff. But yeah, I think it's so disrespectful to people to just kind of say, just do your inner work, or like, and I mean, I suppose I'm kind of guilty of it to some degree, because I convey like maps to the self.
We all do.
Yeah, but it's really good to kind of just tease this out here and acknowledge like that I think we all need to be really careful of not shaming someone for not having got there, or like for not, having the awareness that it's really hard and messy. And then also it's like that balance of like, we are also responsible for our own stuff, so that's something that I've struggled with a lot in my life, and you helped me with that a lot. I think there was a big turning point when I was on the playground, in the playground, playing in the sand with you, in the metaphorical galactic and alchemical plants with you. But it was like, my inner child needed so much validation for years with the same therapist, meant that I was able to go deeper and really rework the early child stuff, and really be heard in my, I'm not okay, I'm suffering, this has been shit, like I've had a hard time.
Which is important though, right?
And I really needed a lot of that.
I agree, me too. I did.
It was very early developmental stuff, kind of about being in an anxious environment, and just I was born such a sensitive soul that I absorbed everything very intensely. I was like, what is this weird planet that I've landed on? This is all very traumatic. So I needed a lot of that before I could come to a place where it was like, don't fast forward my pain, don't disrespect my pain, but then I'm willing to also do something about it. I mean, I've always been willing, I've always been curious about the mysteries of life and who I am, so I've always been involved in inner work in some way. But it was a while before I became really more responsible and sovereign and kind of less in the victim archetype. I was really in a strong,
I agree,
strong
I resonate with that
for a long time. So that's kind of the two sides of it. It's like you always having that discernment, not making sweeping generalizations, I suppose, about the process, and being connected enough to yourself that you know what's going on, and you feel if something's right for you or not. You feel the vibe of what someone's saying, and Because a lot of us, I suppose when there has been developmental trauma, you can end up in coaching relationships or therapeutic relationships or groups where it's just replaying the same trauma of you being not good enough, not heard, or your experience being not validated, so
I think
it's a messy
there's
business. It is messy.
I think being human is a messy process. Growth is a messy process. And I think there's space for all of that. There's space for the needing to have that health space for validation and protection, and to rebuild the trust and the ego, and to really, I remember the first time when the childhood abuse I had experienced in my preschool, when I remember the first time when it was really validated for me by a good friend who was a psychotherapist back in my early 20s. And it was the first time person that actually said it to me. Not even my therapist has said it to me, although he was doing that work with me. He was modeling it.
Yeah.
But he said, she said for the first time, "Oh my God, Samaya, that was really bad. That was really, really bad." And I felt like, bloody hell, it was bad. Why didn't nobody like affirm that for me before, when I've tried to kind of say to people, look, I don't think this is right as a kid. I just doesn't feel right. And it really was important. And it was in my 20s that health support is absolutely important. And in a way, maybe what you talked about, the maps, it's not about that we are guilty to it's I think maps are great, these pathways are wonderful, but they don't substitute the personal journey. They are maps, they are systems, they are like compasses, right? And show the way to things, but that does not like substitute the journey we have to go through. And also the maps cannot necessarily do it for us. So I think it's more about us bringing the disclaimer in that, and us doing our own work to be able to, when we work with people individually, to just kind of really tune in to what that person is needing, and really offer that, and create the right conditions for that growth, right? Because I think all those stages that you talked about, and all those different states, and the victim, and the coming out of the victimhood, they're all part of the process of growth.
Bad, so it's kind of like, when people are even I'm doing this with like the group program. I'm doing it to some degree with the group program that I'm launching really soon, which includes a lot of maps of self and these frameworks like inner child, inner critic, emotions, chakras, all these frameworks that have been so helpful to me, because my mind is also really hungry for information. But it's kind of like, we then say, oh, here's the thing, when people are selling programs or selling like processes that are like, oh, I went through all the mistakes, so here's the thing, so that you don't have to go through it.
I agree. I was thinking of that today.
Still gonna have to go through it, because I've been told some stuff like early on in my therapy journey. People, therapists, I've worked with different therapists, and one for a very long time, which has been the most healing relationship of my life. But it's like, when stuff is kind of told to you mentally and you're not ready to digest it, it's just like water off a duck's, like it does not land. And I've noticed the same with clients, and then like 18 months later you say the same thing and they're like, or I'm like, about my own process. And then it's like, I couldn't have opened up to receive that awareness 18 months ago. I was not ready. So nothing replaces the actual like embodied lived journey of going through our healing and growth and evolution, as weird and mysterious as it is, but yes, there are some frameworks that can be helpful, to make it helpful.
Yes, I agree.
Part of me even wants to like write a little guide for going through the dark night of the soul. Here's what helped me, only stuff that's reassuring, only stuff that makes you feel better, not things that confuse you, don't digest this. But in a way, like, I've gained so much from going through my own multiple dark nights of the soul, some more unconsciously and some very consciously. And that's gold, like that's irreplaceable kind of experience to me, to actually to have learned that through my lived experience means I offer that to my clients. Like I can sit with, and I'm absolutely not comparing pains from different categories of experiences, but I know that I have the capacity to sit with the saddest feelings, the worst pain, the worst horror, the most traumatic things. My body will feel it when something terrible is being described, but it's not my pain. So I have a capacity to hold space for people while they feel their worst experiences. I don't feel scared of that anymore, and like
I love that.
Family, there's been some terrible losses, in the last few years that you're aware of as well.
Of course.
But it's like, when we stopped running around with our old defense mechanisms of here's what we do in a crisis, and it's like, oh, this is crumbling, this doesn't work anymore. And when like, you know, when my sister lost her baby, we were all somehow at a stage when we were able to feel the feelings of it as a kind of a wider family. We wouldn't have been able to feel that 10 years before, but we were all able to kind of just acknowledge how awful and horrendous it was, and how like like nothing substitutes the days. Anyone who's been through grief will know this, like just the everyday moment by moment, washing yourself, feeding yourself, you know, tending to yourself.
Chop wood, carry water kind of
Water,
experience.
kind of keep one foot. And then when you know that you can
Yeah.
feel that, you don't waste so much like of your creative, like your libido, your life force energy. When you know that you are okay with hard feelings, but that involves being in your body so much more, you know.
And that means in a way, when we've experienced and healed enough through and kind of sat with our own mini traumas, bigger traumas enough to process them, then in a way we can be okay to hold that space for other people, and we can go through their own mini shocks in a way that we don't, in a way we can be a bit cleaner sort of as vessels to be able to not go through the shock with them or feel, so in a way that's part of the healing process, isn't it? You can just hold that beautiful awareness there and that stillness and just witness them, and in a way that part of the healing, the whole aspect of maybe listening, being able to listen, not just in terms of with the words, but listen energetically, right?
Yeah, and I keep forgetting the power of it, you know, like even so I do supervision obviously as you know, I'm a psychotherapist, and I'm doing coaching work, somatic coaching, which is very informed by the psychotherapy background. But you know, often I'll get like huge awareness to do with what's happening for me with a client through something that the supervisor, my amazing supervisor will share, or and I don't actually anyway. So I'll have this, you know, awareness from like a theoretical perspective, or something that's like a nugget that's like, ooh, but then ultimately it always comes around to the same kind of conclusion and the same aha of like, oh, just being there and being present and open and listening is the powerful magical bit. It's like just holding space in a kind of trusted therapeutic relationship is more magical than telling them
Yeah.
anything. Or I mean, I think psychoeducation is really important, and I have an aspect of me that's very chatty, you know, and didactic, and kind of like like I love it, you know, information and frameworks and concepts. But really the most powerful moments have come when I've held back and just, you know, I suppose by modeling that I'm okay with my emotions. I might even like tear up in a session with a client or cry or, you know, it's not that it's about me or my stuff. It's just like I can model that, as you say, when you've done your inner work, you can feel that difference. You know what I mean? Like you can tell the
So
difference when you're with somebody who's like
absolutely.
a little bit wincing. You know, I've maybe gone for sessions with people sort of healing one-off sessions where it's a bit of, you can tell there's a bit of an impatience on their part because they just want you to be fixed already. And like, and I know that there's some stuff in their resistance that they're not okay with in themselves. Whereas you can tell someone who's like, yeah, I'm okay with being a total mess, and also being very functional, and being having an inner child and having a powerful, you know, powerful adult woman inside of me, and to be okay with all of your bits. You know, I love those kind of teachers and mentors
Yeah,
who are like playful and silly and not afraid to be, not embarrassed to be human, you know.
that's what I wanted to ask you now and kind of move towards this direction. So for those who have done a bit of this work or a lot of this work or whatever, enough of this work to then get a little bit more comfortable, because for me that's when things started really shifting and started to play so much more and started to feel my presence in the world, and the ripples I create, and that there were big ripples, and that's when I started having fun. I'd love to hear more from you about, I guess, what you experienced, that it can be possible. And I know that's what a lot of the work that you're doing as a coach is about, and leading women to. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about what is possible and what we can experience, because I think it would be beautiful to bring that flavor in as well, of like when. And actually, I think it's probably what we need to keep the vision for a lot of us women as we grow, right? To keep on envisioning and bringing more of that in and anchoring that more into our reality, into the planet as well. I'd love to know more about your experience, what's possible to have, to experience, to feel, to see, to enjoy, and the potential of that in our lives, if you want to
Yeah,
anything
good
about
stuff,
that.
because we were talking about all the heavy inner work and how hard it is, and like,
Which is
don't only
cool, which is like,
which is important, and
it's
probably
important.
it's reassuring to me to hear when other people are normal humans, but also the good stuff, like the juicy stuff. I feel like sparkles and champagne bubbles in my body, as you're asking me that question. Because I feel that's a lot of what you bring, as well as the joy. You have this like galactic queen energy, but also you have a really sweet kind of capacity to bring. You can go into the shadow and the light, and I
Nurturer.
think I can as well. So I think I probably saw it in
Mm.
you before I was able to own those qualities in myself. But it's just such a kind of a lightness and a playfulness, and a capacity to enjoy really small daily things that I feel is so rich in my life. And it doesn't have to be coming from the outside of me. It can be like just in my own little, having the crack with myself, which, like,
Yeah.
I had no relationship with myself before. I was like totally dissociated and cut off, um, in my early life. Or I was in my head a lot, but just kind of going, oh my God, does nobody else see this? What's going on here? Why does no one else see this whole other layer of life? What's the meaning of all of it? It's just so intense. So it wasn't really quite
Mm.
out. But now it just feels like there's a peace, there's an inner kind of sense of I'm okay. I'm more than okay, feeling so much more valuable and lovable. And then when I stray off that track, it's like I have this inner anchor that I can come back to and be like, oh no, it's okay, you can come back, this is the truth. So it's this really simple kind of just simple but profound inner connection of just feeling myself in my body. It's probably, words can't really do justice to it, but it's feeling at home, feeling
Yeah.
at home, feeling like I belong on this planet, like I'm not a kind of an imposter
Yeah.
or an alien.
And that
Feeling
it's been a choice, maybe to some extent. I felt that for me, I've kind of had to really process this, and I've really chosen it again and again.
yeah,
For me, that has felt like I've chosen this, not like on an abstract level of my soul chose to be here, but as Samaya, the personality and the person who I've come to be, I have been choosing it, and that's made it much more comfortable. But there's also been the element for me, these things like there's so many infinite possibilities that open up that I could not have believed it.
I know, and it continues. So it's kind of
Yeah.
like, before I had a sense of like, what is the meaning of life? I need to know. And it was a kind of a fear-born, stressful, painful place that I needed to know. And I was researching stuff and I was seeking meaning outside of myself. And now it's more like, oh yeah, there's a whole mystery out there and I don't need to have it figured out. And there's this endless possibility and potentiality of what we can enjoy. But yeah, I do choose it also consciously on a daily basis. But I feel like that's okay. Like it's not sort of the toxic positivity thing where I
No, it comes from a
bulldoze.
much more real place.
It's integrated. So it's like you don't
Mm.
have to bulldoze over your experience as it arises to then be like, no, think positive, think positive. It's more kind of like, I'm in really shit form. Or, God, what's that feeling? Why am I having that old horrible feeling again? And I can see it for what it is. Because it's like I'm a bigger whole container now for all my experiences. So before, my experiences were completely overwhelming and I couldn't really tolerate the emotions in my body because there were so many of them. And plus I was feeling
Yes.
other people's emotions around me. And
Thank you
all
for saying that.
the unhealed emotion, all the stuff that, like, say, my grandmother, on the French side, and it's going to be her birthday soon. She's going to be 94, but she even talked about this with me, and I wrote a blog post about it. How she just kind of doesn't do sadness or emotions. So I joke that like I was like, it's okay, mommy, because me and mom have been crying all the tears that you didn't cry, and I'm joking, but like it's true. So I was crying like all the tears of the world. And can't remember where I was going with that. Yes, not bypassing the feelings. So
Yeah.
it's like I acknowledge this, and then sometimes there's a bit of like trying to rush past it and be like, get to the good stuff. So it's like, no, just not wallowing in it either, because like I go to the fourth
Yeah.
Enneagram, which is like amplifying emotions as well. So it's neither amplifying them and getting carried away with them, nor denying that they're there, and
I
just
feel, yeah.
container for them to flow. And it's
Yeah.
you don't have to be so scary. It's just an emotion. And
And
I
and
am for
yeah.
emotions.
And sometimes there's also an indication that actually we don't need to always wallow into something. If we've been
Exactly.
doing enough of that work, you just recognize when something happens. So, okay, this is here again. Okay, cool. Do I need to fully identify with it? No. Do I need to? For me, there's something about the lesson that is hidden in certain emotional patterns that happen. sometimes as a lesson, and once I get the key from the lesson, what it had to teach me, then I move on. And like, for instance, I had a friend on Christmas, and he brought his guitar and I played the piano. And he mentioned something about the music, which is when I started writing long time ago. It was very, very deep and processing loss. My music was always about processing loss. But when I play, it feels very light. It doesn't have the heaviness to it, but the sound is deep. Yeah. So it's interesting because it doesn't feel there anymore. And it's because I did my time with it. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so when these things come up, it's like when the lessons have been learned, when those energy signatures have been upgraded and integrated and done the work that they needed to do for our soul work, then they don't have the same, we don't need to, like, when they revisit, it's like, ah, hi, you know, but it doesn't hold the same value for us.
Yeah.
Because often sadness and pain and all that, they hold value, they hold the truth that is essential for us to understand and integrate, right? So when that's been integrated enough, then it's just a visit from an old friend that is like, okay, we'll sit and have tea, but we don't need to, like, engage in the same way.
We're not going to move in together forever.
Yeah.
Like, it's not so great when you get to that stage though, and it's like, that's something important there that you touched on. They're there for a reason. They're pointing us to heat. There's something in our past that has not been digested or
Yeah.
resolved, but also they're part of our identity very often.
Yeah,
So that's why,
that's true.
it's like, oh, who am I without this way of behaving, or who am I
Yeah.
without this role? Like, when I stopped being the eldest sister, bossy boots to my two younger sisters in adulthood, like in and around my late 20s, there was such a grief, because I was like, who am I without being the one who is in charge of
Such an important thing.
And I honestly, I was bereft when they were kind of like feeling more strong enough to kind of tell me to back off, and they were perfectly well managing their lives, especially when they've gone through challenges. And I was like, oh wow, they're adult women. But then who am I? Because I was kind of, I suppose, raised to be a little helper, and raised, so my sense of worth and value came from that role.
Yeah.
And then when the role is kind of taken away from you, it's like an emptiness, you know? So I've noticed that
So important.
every time I've had to let go of a kind of a pattern that I'm running, or a role or an identity that kind of, stays to some degree as a part of my personality, but every time I let it go, it's just like, it's like a rising of grief. And then I can let it go. And then, as you say, it's faster, and it's like, all right,
Yeah.
that wasn't as annoying as I thought it would be. So it's almost like shocking. I'm almost like a bit like, hold on, am I not going to, wallow in the drama of this for a journal 50 pages about this? It's like, all right, that was really easy. Like, my work now feels much more easeful and more flowy. And I'm still kind of like, I think I'm letting go of the tail end of like that it has to be hard, that it has to be hard won. It has to be like straining and striving, and life is so challenging. So I'm still a bit like wondering, is there going to be any like self-sabotaging backlash, as I move forward? There's a whole lot of new things that I'm kind of bringing out now into the world. And it's like, yeah, it can be easeful, it's like poor little
And it's almost like,
hard.
because we are humans and we grow through contrast, right? So there's going to be, it's part of our software to, in a way, experience some of that. But I do find that the quality of problems are becoming different, are becoming better. And I feel like, say, I realize that sometimes I handle things that can seem like pretty intense, but I handle them like so much in such a different way, and with so much more ease, and almost in a way, in a very like normalized way. Like I would deal with, like, I feel much more of a heavyweight now in terms of what's possible to deal with, but I do it moves through quickly. And that's what I wanted to say, because you've said something that really clicked earlier. You talked about when you used to feel that heaviness, and in a way, when we start, and part of that being an identification, right? So when we start lifting that heaviness, that's where all these opportunities are there. And it's incredible what's possible to create with so much more lightness. And we can bring other energies in that can be so much more fun to play with. And that's one of the things I feel is so important. And I know it's probably what you're doing with your work. So I'm aware of the time as well. We're gonna
Wow.
probably, but
Yeah.
I want this to be open to be what it needs to be. I'd love to hear a little bit more about the program. I know you have a program coming up starting on the 29th of Jan.
Yes, I
So
do.
tell us a little bit more, because I think that's quite juicy. I'd love to, I'd love people to know how they can, if they feel like they would like to get to know you more or like to work with you, I think they're in for a treat. And I'd love to know more about what you're offering then, what to expect and what that journey is about.
Yeah, so just to pick up on what you said just before, I talk about the upcoming work, I think that embracing the light stuff and the lighter way of being is so important, but it takes a lot of courage because it's
It
really
does.
scary to people. All those quotes and memes about like we're not afraid of our shadow, we're afraid of our own light, we're afraid of our own power, because that's also what's in the shadow. It's all the good juicy stuff,
Yeah.
so it's actually now more and more, and even in this kind of work that I'm going to be doing with a group of women, it is more about looking at the joyful stuff, like talking about joy. And I was really scared and ashamed about talking about the good stuff before, because I assumed that people wouldn't be interested. Like my whole history with good feelings, was really kind of fraught and messy. So just to kind of really acknowledge that that's actually, it's not as easy as it seems to allow in
No.
simplicity and pleasure. It's like we make it so bloody hard for ourselves. So yeah, so
Yeah.
I'm going to be basically, I'm kind of synthesizing some of the core concepts and maps to the self and all of these things that come up time and time and time again in my one-to-one work, because I've been working mainly kind of behind the scenes with one-to-one work for the last few years in psychotherapy and in coaching and kind of mentoring,
Mm-hmm.
and basically I suppose it's come to the point where I'm really clear now, and it feels ripe to actually bring it together in a group format where more people get to kind of hear about this information that they can then apply in their own lives. And they
Yeah.
can do that, they can also have support with me through one-to-one sessions, because often hearing
Nice.
about information activates a kind of an awakening and a healing and a bit of a whoa, this is unleashing something for me. So I want to offer also one-to-one support for those who are kind of open to going deeper in their process, but also it's for people who are maybe doing healing work or doing personal development work, or say people who are teaching or involved in different modalities that are more
Yeah.
body oriented, like yoga or somatic work or whatever, for them to have like a really solid framework
Yeah.
understanding for all this shadow work, all of this unpeeling of the layers that we all have to deal with. So it's like no matter what happens, no matter how evolved you are, until the rest of my end of my days, I will be having a relationship with my inner child. I will be
Mm.
having to like neutralize my inner critic, to stop it, to not let it be the one who makes the decisions in my life, and to become bigger than all of these different inner aspects. So I'm kind of, I suppose, inviting people to through the lens, like through my own take on these things, I suppose synthesizing a lot of what I've learned in my psychotherapy training and what I've seen pan
Yeah.
out in reality as being helpful to people. Because
Mhm.
it really amazes me, when, like, as we said before, you can't replace the process, but also there's some really core things that I think in a way I've become a bit more psychoeducational in my psychotherapy work now than I was originally, because there's a kind of a ripeness in people at the moment to kind of get these concepts. They're more out there on Instagram or in the different kind of media channels. People are
Yeah.
understanding this work more, so it's helpful to people to know, to have these frameworks and then apply it.
Absolutely. And also, let's not take away the fact that it's also experiential work you're doing there, and that you're
Yeah,
really holding, I mean, a really, really deep container for people. That's been very obvious to me working with you. You know how to do this so well, and with so much integrity, so much wisdom, and so much of your own personal, really beautiful energy. And you have such a wonderful capacity to communicate those things and really facilitate healing for people through that. So I think that it's such a powerful space. And I have to say that, you know what it's like in the coaching world. It's such a gift to have people with a background that you have, because a lot of people who are really wonderful coaches and doing wonderful work, but there's some of the work that comes with the psychotherapy and the deeper layers of how they influence our psyche and the psychology and all that, that is so impactful and so foundational. I don't think there was a coincidence that you were conversation number 4.
I love it. It's my favorite.
It's
Like,
great. I love it so much. It's
all
one
my
of
recommendations. Yeah.
it's one of my favorite cards, 4 of Wands, actually. I think you're very much the 4 of, like, I
So
think
fun. That's
Ah,
sorry to interrupt, but
yeah,
that's
no, it's Four of Wands.
for me. My association with the Four of Wands is coming home, like a celebration kind of coming home, and that's the name of the program, Coming Home, Uncover the Gold Within.
There you
So it's
go.
the Four of Wands kind of
I feel very Four of Wands conversation.
it's like,
But it's a wand, right? Yeah.
but it is because it's passion as well, yeah. But it's like, if you can get this foundational stuff, like really have a home base that you can come back to and go like, oh, this is happening, I know how to take care of myself with this, then you can go forth and thrive, you know. And just to say as well, I'm going to bring in some of the juicy stuff and the stuff that would have been maybe harder for me to own in the past, the more spiritual stuff and kind of archetypal stuff like the tarot and energy and the chakras, because I also think that that can be missing from the world of psychotherapy, even though a lot of psychotherapists are very spiritual. They just don't say it publicly. And that
I
kind of
think so. I think it's
is very energetic. But
I remember when I trained as a counselor, I felt a little bit constricted as I was growing to that framework of, but I think that the fact that you embody both and you bring both is so powerful, because I do feel that there's a real purpose having the framework, psychotherapy offering the framework, that actually makes it really valuable for what it offers. So for me, that's something that is important to share as well. I think there's a reason for it. But I feel that in this work, you are doing a beautiful eclectic mix that is really powerful. And I think that it includes the intuition and the inner work and the creative stuff as well.
yeah,
Psychic
thanks.
creative
They
stuff.
can't, they don't need to be separate, you know. So
No, they don't.
there's a really important reason why it's a certain way, because it helps clients kind of use the therapist in a way that they need to. So
Yeah.
that's really important. But it's like, rather than me saying, oh, there's only one way of working with people, it all has a place. So this is not going to be a group process, like it's not going to be group therapy, it's going to be
No.
more educational. But in the one-to-one work, there is a container to support anything that's coming up. And people can also kind of have it as a secondary thing alongside other healing work that they're in, if they're already in a healing relationship with someone, you know. So it's going to kind of blend in all the juicy stuff. And yeah, like I want to have fun with it as well, because I think if we can't laugh about our process, it's just, life is so hard, you know, that we have to. And that's what I love about you as well, as your sense of humor, and you're so kind of natural in how you integrate all of this. So I feel
I
more
needed to stay
here
sane.
completely.
I
Oh
needed
my
to stay
God, like I
sane.
can't, like I'm so earnest and so serious in so many ways, but I'm also very playful, and I'm more comfortable. I feel safe now in my body to feel playful and kind of allow in, the good feelings. So I suppose, having come on this massive journey myself, I feel so delighted to be able to, for it to have had a point, not just for my own life, but for people to know that you can come through a lot of darkness and self-doubt and low self-worth and a lot of kind of adversity into really, kind of integrating that into yourself and your life, and actually deriving some joy and juiciness from this
Yeah.
very
So
ephemeral life that we're living,
this program of yours sounds to me like it's very much about preparing, giving that preparation for people to really step into their joy, right? And to be able to embody themselves in a deeper way, and to really kind of start having fun with what's possible for them. And that's where the Four of Wands comes in. And I think that, whoever was to work with you, I think they'll be very, very lucky, and they'll get a lot from it. So that's really beautiful. And can you tell us a little bit, any social media where people can connect with you, or your website, the details, like?
Yeah, so I, at the moment, actually I have a small kind of intimate Facebook group, if anyone wants to start just like being in that environment. It's called Inner Oracle Sanctuary. You can click through it from my Facebook page, which is embodymytruth.com. And like, I think also following your own sense of what you need at the moment. So it's not like, if you're in a group, you don't have to like really engage with it. Just let things trickle, language, concepts kind of absorb when you're kind of engage with it at your own pace. But so that's the Facebook. And then I'm also running women's circles now, kind of like moon circles or nurture nests.
Beautiful.
Online nurture nests, to offer a container in a group context. Is, some people share a little bit, but it's not a big mad group process. So about once or twice a month on a Friday evening, or moon related days. So you can kind of have a taster as well of
Beautiful.
how, I suppose, hold space for people and kind of guide people into more of a deep kind of connection with themselves and self.
And I love that. And I think the group is a really great way for people to get to know you more as well. And there you do share a lot of really great value there. Like, I learn a lot from it every time. It goes very deep, and it gives an opportunity for people to really go deep and process a lot.
Yeah, and a bit more of a private space, because like, it's
Yeah,
not about kind of encouraging massive like oversharing that's not comfortable, but just the main Facebook wall just looks is all a bit too kind of open, so it's just like
yeah,
a bit more of a contained.
of
The
course.
program then is the big thing that I'm launching that I'm so excited about,
Good.
and I want to really encourage people as well, if you're, whether or not you know are interested in this kind of work or doing this kind of work with me, to really follow that golden thread of your desires, where you're like, okay, there's going to be some shadow work, but I want to have a bit of fun with this. Like, there has to be
Yeah,
a bit of crack to be knocked out of it, as we say in Ireland.
good.
But also to kind of follow your interests. So you might not be interested in all of the concepts, but see what you're drawn to, because that's going to be your medicine. That's going to be the bit that is going to help you to heal, not what somebody else tells you. So it's kind of like a menu of things that I'm going to be delivering for people. And then it's not going to be heavy on like homework or worksheets or anything like that. It's like leaving it, trusting that there's going to be an integration that happens at each person's pace, whether they do just the teaching modules or they also do one-to-one support work. You don't have to engage in the Facebook group that I'll set up for that either. You can, making it work for you has to work for you, doesn't it?
Beautiful. Absolutely. I love, honestly, Delphine, I just really love all of this that you're sharing. I just love so much what you do.
Chat about this side of things, the reality of this work with you, with someone who gets it.
Yeah, no, I just really enjoy it. And just before we go, I want to hear, like, something I like to ask people at the end, if you wanted to share, if relevant for you, just one other habit or mindset or little ritual that you do, either on a daily basis or every now and then, that you feel supports you in your, I don't know, to set up for your day particularly. Yeah, so nothing necessarily about the big stuff like our inner work necessarily, but just to set you up for your day. Is this something you like to do? Or, and it might be that you don't do it daily, but it's something you occasionally like to do or whatever.
Yeah, I dance like nobody's watching.
Nice.
I remember we vibed on our, like, I make Spotify playlists like there is no tomorrow. My one whole screen of
Nice.
my phone is covered in all my shortcuts, and I'm really into my mood music, so I have playlists for every single possible mood. It's ridiculous, and the titles of them all, some of them are for cooking, some of them are for getting ready to go out, some of them anyway. So I
love
just
it.
whenever I think like, oh, I should be doing some yoga, or I should be doing this or whatever, I just stick on a tune and I boogie, and it is like a revolution, and this is only possible, I guess, because I feel comfortable to express myself. I used to not want to dance like in public or anything at all, and now I will dance like I would dance in a 5 rhythms class in a public, like in a nightclub. That's how far I've come, which is pretty crazy looking sometimes. Right. It's like dancing my feelings out.
Yeah.
And it's hilarious, and it always surprises me actually when I'm stuck. I'm like, oh, this old chestnut.
Yeah.
And so now I just do it really regularly.
Nice. I love it.
Pure medicine. It's amazing.
It's such a beautiful medicine, like you said, and transmuting stuff and kind of like alchemizing, right? Energy.
It like lifts your vibe, also grounds you.
Integrating light and shadow, and
And music is like, I think I have a Sufi heart. I think I was like a whirling, dervish in a previous life, but it's just, it really connects the soul and the earthly plane. We're just these little beings spinning between the two, spheres, and it's so joyful. Music really feeds my heart. So that's my daily.
Delphine, thank you so much for that. That's lovely. I think it's a nice note to pick up on people's kind of little habits, rituals, what sets them up on their day. And I just really appreciated having this conversation. I always really enjoy sharing. I know that, sometimes we have our texts where we kind of like go quite into stuff, I'll come up with my own stuff to you. And I really appreciate you. And it's been really lovely. I do hope, for those of you who connected with Delphine, do go to connect with her in Inner Oracle Sanctuary, her Facebook group. I know you started doing a podcast recently and having people like interviews with people.
Healers and heretics. Yeah, that's going to be going live really
That's
soon.
wonderful. You share incredible value, and I'm looking forward to kind of seeing how we both grow and evolve and get to share our lives in their way that they move forward, really. So thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciated you.
Likewise, thank you so much for being a part of my life and a massive part of my own growth and evolution. Love you.
Thank you, and love you too. And Thank you so much, all of you, for watching. And feel free to, if you're watching it on YouTube, feel free to subscribe, because there's going to be more of these interviews coming once a month, or as they resonate, I guess. So, and there's more content that I share there. Thank you all so much, and I'll see you very soon. Bye.